Welcome to Good Burger Reviews. My name is John, and I'm here to do a brand new 2026 movie review, and that movie is We Bury the Dead.
Oh my God.
I can assure you, you have nothing to fear.
This movie was released in January of 2026. It is directed by Zach Hilditch. It is starring Daisy Ridley, Mark Cole Smith, and Brandon Thorntis. Basic plot. After the United States accidentally detonates an experimental weapon off the eastern coast of Tasmania, the city of Hobart is destroyed, and victims on the island not caught in the immediate blast are rendered brain dead. Soon it is found that some of the brain dead are regaining motor function, becoming undead, with some of them becoming violent. American Ava, whose husband Mitch was on a business trip in Woodbridge, volunteers as a part of Australian military effort to retrieve and dispose of the bodies. Ava, who is teamed up with Clay, decide to go on their own mission to Woodbridge to rescue Mitch and battle the undead along the way. So as we walk into 2026, we're starting off with another zombie movie. Now, we did have a zombie movie that I just reviewed, Queens of the Dead. Also, still coming off the high of 28 years later and an expected sequel next week, 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Wondering if with this zombie movie, if we're going to get zombied out before 2026 even begins. So this zombie movie takes somewhat of a different approach, but also somewhat as the same approach that we've seen time and time again, blends it all together and gives us just a slightly different take on zombies. So let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly on We Bury the Dead. So the first thing I put in the positives is going to be the special effects and the practical effects. Even though the zombies are used sparsely, especially in the front end of this movie, once we see them, the special effects, the makeup, the practical effects, that the zombie design on these zombies are, I think, top notch. I think they're really good, they're really scary, and they're really kind of gross to look at. Now keep in mind, these zombies, sometimes it's like a roll of the dice or the spin of the roulette wheel of what type of zombie we're going to experience as this movie unravels, because there are all levels of zombies in this movie. Some that just stand there and stare, others that walk slowly, we have some runners, and we have some aggressive ones. Now I'll put this part of how I felt about the zombies in the positive, because you never knew what we were going to get each time our final girl comes across a different zombie. Along with the special effects and practical effects, I thought the cinematography was done quite well too. I think there's lots of good camera shots, lots of good visuals. This is a very apocalyptic zombie movie, which most zombie movies are apocalyptic. But this one kind of had that same sense of the army presence that was in 28 Days Later was similar here, because the army is marching around and collecting bodies. There's also some good from sky shots on down, which kind of expands of how grandeur this apocalyptic thing is. Overall, I thought they did a good job of showing us a post-apocalyptic segment of the world where there's fires, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no electricity, it's just destruction and smoke and dead bodies all over the place.
Volunteering your services during this dark time.
Hey, this is Mitch. Please leave a message and I'll get right back to you.
Please, tell me you're okay.
Now, I've been seeing mixed response to the zombies in this movie, or the amount of zombies in this movie, and they are sparse in the front end, but I felt like they took that like Jaws or maybe early Halloween approach of showing the antagonist or the villain just in small little segments or just a little bit in the beginning, and then seeing more of the zombies and more of what the zombies can do as the movie progresses. So as our final girl and her companion make their way through this zombified world, it gets more and more dreadful and intense. Now, the zombies do this thing with their teeth as well, which was kind of disturbing to hear and watch because it's kind of like they're gnawing their teeth. And I felt like there was little homages to some of the bigger zombie franchises. Like when they would gnaw their teeth, it kind of reminded me of the zombies in World War Z, especially at the end when Brad Pitt's in the lab. But there was also some semblance of this being more of a disease or an infected type of zombie as well, since it was a response to some sort of biological chemical warfare thing that gets set off in the area. And and that gets shown by the levels of zombies and how only certain people become zombies and other people just become instantly dead. And they never really clarify why. But that was fun because that just added to the mystery, intrigue, and horror that this movie has. Another thing that I liked in the positives is definitely the music, the sound. Not only the score was very chilling, especially in some of the scenes. It seemed to fit the mood of the entire movie and the tone of what they were going for. But also they would add these some regular music songs in there as well, which I really enjoyed. Some of the scenes where, like one scene in particular where there's this kind of alternative Rocky song, and the main guy and the main girl are riding on a motorcycle through this apocalyptic world. That was a pretty neat scene. But that will lead me to the mix because, like I said, the zombies are in small portions in the beginning, and as the movie progresses, we see them a little bit more. But it seems as though the zombies aren't the main threat or the only threat in this movie. There is a military presence and some other antagonists roaming around, and we'll get into that in my spoiler section. But this movie comes off more as a drama with zombies, just the zombie apocalypse kind of as a backdrop for what's going on, because most of the movie is about our final girl, Ava, journeying through this apocalyptic zombie world looking for her husband, who may or may not be dead or a zombie. So in the mix also, I'll put the overall story. I think overall it was a decent and intriguing story, but there were some parts that were added maybe to just subvert expectations that seemed to just not fit with what was going on. There's a whole middle section that seems to go down a certain route, and then it just goes away. And with that is also some predictability, especially with the two main male characters in this movie. One character I predicted, they kind of made it seem like they might have been dead, but then they weren't. And then another character who right out the gate just seemed like bad news and was bad news. So we'll get into the negatives, and with the negatives is the ending. So I'll just say overall this movie has decent intrigue, build up attention. They do a good job of creating a world and kind of creating a lore for these specific zombies. And it kind of, you think it's going to lead up to something, and then the ending is just kind of a little bit of a disappointment as far as the amount of zombies in the end and where the story goes overall. Also taking some big plot points from movies we've seen very recently. But I will get into that into the spoilers. So like as always, spoiler warning in the negative section, and as we wrap up the review and get into the rating. So Ava is married to Mitch, and it seems like they're pretty much somewhat newlyweds, but they're already having rocky issues. And then they're separated at a time. Mitch is in Tasmania and Ava's somewhere else, and this apocalyptic thing happens that's like a shockwave, biological, chemical warfare. They never really get into all the details, but it kind of hits this area of Tasmania and kills over 500,000 people and turns them into the dead. But some of them are undead, so they're coming back. And I thought it was strange how, like, they would say, when they would find certain ones, oh, this one came back online, like they were AI robots, but they're clearly people and robots. I mean, they're clearly people and undead zombies, so why are they coming back online? There was never an AI component to this movie.
The odd ones that do come back online are docile.
Oh my god.
I can assure you, you have nothing to fear.
And Clay and Ava's job is to carry the dead zombies out so that they can be taken care of, or the dead people out so that they can be buried, i.e. the title, We Bury the Dead. And I thought that was a pretty neat, it felt very realistic, as if something like this would really happen. I felt like they did a good job of how it would kind of unravel and how it would be. And, you know, they had this whole thing where if they had these like little canisters that would shoot out smoke, and if you found a zombie, you would sign that off and the smoke would come out and the army guys would come and shoot the zombies dead and they'd kill them down. Now, Ava comes to find out that where her husband is like over 200 miles away, and it could take forever, if ever, to get to him. So she decides that she's going to break away from the main crew, and her and Clay are going to go on their own little zombie apocalyptic adventure to try and find Mitch and, you know, bury dead along the way. And like I said, some of these zombies were very slow and would just stand there. And I seem like when they were like that is when they were the creepiest. The fast running ones definitely reminded me of the 28 Days zombies. Now, there was one zombie that she meets in an RV. It's like this family, and the father is like almost normal. Like, he's definitely the undead, but like he's digging the grave already for himself and for his family, and I thought that was strange. And like, she comes over and helps him dig the grave. I mean, it was a neat little moment, but it was just, I guess it was just interesting to see how different some of the zombies were from each other. How like some were crazy, some just stood there, and some literally seemed almost human. Now, as they're out and about, they come across another military guy as they're getting closer and closer to where they suspect Mitch is, and he's Riley. Right out the gate, and he's the one that I suspected was bad news right in the moment that you see him. He just totally reminded me of every army guy that's at the end of 28 Days Later. And he tells Ava, like, oh, Clay's done, Clay's gone, he escaped. And I felt like he's not dead. So like, those are the two parts that were so predictable, that that Riley was going to be bad and that Clay wasn't going to be dead and he'd be back. So the whole middle scene with Riley, like, they go back to his house and there's this whole weird thing where he's requesting her to slow dance in his wife's dress. And it's like he's kind of holding the whole idea of, I won't take you to where you need to get to find Mitch if you don't do this for me. So it got really weird and strange for a few minutes while we're dealing with this Riley character. Now, there was some scary moments in this, because it turns out Riley has his dead and pregnant wife in the bedroom, and he's got a ton of zombies in his shed as well. So there was some good parts to that, but it just seemed like we were going in one direction, and this whole thing with Riley was just like a pit stop before we continue the journey to find Mitch. As predicted, Ava battles Riley, conquers him, gets away, and then starts heading towards where she suspects Mitch is. And of course, Clay comes back at the last moment in the final act, where they figure out that Clay is staying in this big resort where there's lots of zombies. And I thought, and this was where it was a little disappointing, because I thought there was going to be a little bit more zombie action at the end. And all she really finds out is that he cheated on her before the zombie apocalypse happened. And it was like she admits that she cheated on him. So like that's where it was getting more dramatic and less like it would seem like we were focusing more on Ava as the character as a whole and less on what was going on with her and these zombies, especially in that last scene. And then, you know, this movie I thought was going to end with that, but then there's this whole thing which I feel like, spoilers of course, they stole this from 28 years later. Like the zombie's pregnant and gives birth and there's a baby, and it's like we just saw this. So I don't know if it really was like a sequel bait, but it definitely was not a completely conclusive ending. I mean, her and Clay get away at the end. They survive, you know, but they just leave Mitch behind because he's dead. And, you know, they take the baby. The end. So at the end of the day, we're going to get down to business on this one. I'm going to blend all my mixed emotions. This is a very mixed bag because I feel like there were some parts that were done so well and so great, and there was lots of mystery and intrigue and horror, which I love. And I really did enjoy their interpretation of the zombies here, for the most part. And there was this real cool scene where, I mean, I guess the best scene was her running from this one zombie through a bus, which was pretty intense. But it does get bogged down with the extra side story and a little bit of too much stolen from the 28 days, weeks, years franchise on this one. So I'm going to blend all that together and give this one a basic burger. So I would say this is probably not one that needs to be ran out to the theater and seen, but save it for streaming. I mean, there's definitely enough meat on the bone here to enjoy it. And don't forget to stay scared of those slow-moving and almost still grinding teeth zombies.